And it's 12 o'clock and we are live. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. I am Ray Mahlaka and I am with Daily Maverick. This afternoon, we will be talking about electricity prices in South Africa. We know that electricity prices have increased by more than 500% since 2007. I think we can all agree that these increases have hit households, businesses, and everybody quite hard. So this webinar will hopefully help us understand how electricity tariffs in South Africa are structured and also determined. But a few announcements first before we start the discussion. First, thank you to ABSA for sponsoring this webinar. We really appreciate it. Second, we have invited Eskom to participate in this webinar. We had confirmation from Eskom that its official would join us. However, Eskom withdrew this morning from the webinar. Eskom says it cannot talk about electricity tariffs, especially its latest tariff increase application. I'm sure you have read in the media that Eskom reportedly asked energy regulator Nersa for a tariff increase of up to 44% for next year, but these things are out of our control, but we will continue with this discussion without Eskom. And third, we welcome your comments and questions, so please send them. I am now joined by Brian Sitratwa. He is the head of Department for Electricity Pricing and Tariff at Nersa, which of course is the energy regulator. Brian, good to have you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ray, and good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone.
Well, Brian, where we can just start off is that, the tariffs that are charged by Eskom, to direct customers and municipalities are regulated by Nersa, the regulator. Eskom usually comes to Nersa to say it wants to generate billions of rands worth of money from electricity sales from the next 3 years or so. And generating this money will require tariffs to be increased by a certain percentage. Brian, maybe where we can start off is by you explaining what factors does Nersa consider when it receives a revenue or tariff increase application from Eskom?
No, thanks, Ray. Let me first maybe just explain that what guides Nersa from the beginning. The thing that guides Nersa is the Electricity Regulation Act, more especially the Section 15(1) of the Act, which clearly states that the regulator must allow an efficient entity to recover its full cost of supply plus a reasonable return or margin. So that is the starting point. So in terms of us complying with that section of the Act, then Nersa developed a methodology. A methodology referred to as the MYPD. And let me just explain what the MYPD is. It stands for Multi-Year Price Determination Methodology. And that multi-year determination methodology is based on what is internationally known as a rate of return methodology. And what it does, it includes the total cost of supplying, which would be your salaries, your operating costs, your depreciation, maintenance. Those are the costs that would be included. But also it would then include a return, which would be determined by Nersa, a return on its asset base. So if the asset base is 200 billion and the return is 10%, then that means that you'd be giving them 10 billion, 20 billion of that return, on that return. And then you add that to their cost, it will give you the total, the revenue that Eskom must then recover. Now, that is an average tariff. It's not a tariff for each individual customer. So it will be an average tariff for the various classes of customers. Remember, there is industrial customers, there is commercial customers like your supermarkets and staff offices. There will be your residential customers,
Yeah.
there would be maybe agricultural customers. So each customer class would have their own tariffs that are set for them. And this would be based on the cost that the cost drivers that those customers are pushing.
Mm.
There will be several cost drivers that they are pushing. Some customers are on high voltage, like the industrial customers, but we as residential customers are at the lowest voltage level. So we'll have different cost drivers, and that will then determine what tariffs you are going to be charging for each one of those customers. I don't know if I can pause here.
Yeah, no, the point is here, it's a very complex process and a very technical one
Oh,
as well, Brian. But it's interesting you talk about the Electricity Regulation Act that NERSA looks to when considering the pricing methodology. And you know, this methodology, it would take into account the interests of Eskom, the interests of consumers, you and I, the supply industry as well too. So do you think that you know NERSA's decisions truly reflect a balanced interest of all stakeholders? I mean, you have to consider all stakeholders and how they will be impacted, right?
yeah, we do, but within obviously some limitations.
Mm,
Remember, at the end of the day, there are three things that maybe to answer your question.
sure.
You need to have an Eskom that is sustainable, financially sustainable. You need to have affordable tariffs to customers, which is a difficult one. And then you need to have to consider the impact on the overall economy. That meaning that you don't want to kill the GDP. You don't want to see an unnecessary inflationary increases. But over the years, if you look at it, and we've got evidence to that, Eskom would come at a certain level of tariff increases, sometimes at 30%, and then we would actually look at the what we call efficient costs. And any cost that we believe is not efficient, we would then reduce or not allow into the total costs. And then at the end, so the example I've just made of 32%, we ended up at 18%. That means more than 12% was taken out, which is now trying to balance. Otherwise, we would have, if only considering Eskom, we may have maybe been at that 32%. But also, the other part that we're doing is that we calculate a return based on some financial principles, weighted average cost of capital, and most of the time we've come to about 10% return. But what we have done in order to protect the customers, we have actually limited that return. At times, we only give them 2% return, or I think the most that we gave in the last few years has been 4%. So we don't allow the full return. We're saying because we want to also have affordability, we must consider that Eskom take this little return in protection of the customers. But also the other part that is difficult is that over the last years, as we mentioned, there was a very large build process. We needed to build new power stations. Our other power stations were actually reaching the time where they need more maintenance. So that led to that overall increase over the years, because to build these three large power stations, first of all, the estimated cost at the beginning were much lower than what actually came out, and that's what led mostly to the high increases that we've seen. But over the years, we have actually seen tariffs that Eskom has been applying for not been approved at that level, but approved at a lower level. Had they not been approved, had they been approved, the situation would have been worse in terms of the economy and affordability to customers.
And Brian, we'll talk into detail about how Eskom's operational and financial affairs are reflected into those tariff decisions. But you are right. You know, for many years, NERSA has disagreed with Eskom on its tariff wishes and the revenue it should generate from charging electricity to customers. And this has often resulted in the regulator often approving a significantly lower tariff for Eskom than what the power utility has desired. But Brian, tariff increases are quite topical at the moment, especially what Eskom has applied for next year or the next 3 years. As I said in my introduction, Eskom has reportedly asked Nersa for an increase of up to 44% next year. And in that 44% or up to 44%, there's tariffs that Eskom wants to charge its direct customers, those it directly supplies electricity, and the municipalities as well too. How much can you tell us about this, Brian? Because I know that consultations are still happening, among all stakeholders. How much can you tell us, if any, at all, about what Eskom wants?
May I, for the sake of me speaking as a representative and not, and also taking into account that we still have to go and present some of these things to our board. So may I refrain maybe from talking about that one, but I can explain maybe what happened in the previous years, because those decisions have been made. But on this particular one, may we?
The process, yeah, you can explain the process of what usually happens,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that is easy. I mean, I'm not committing the board on this particular one. So when we receive an application from Eskom, the first thing is for us to check it for compliance to the methodology, that the information that we require is complete in that application. And then after we've done that, we then take it out for consultation to stakeholders. And we give stakeholders normally it's 30 days for period for written comments. Once we've done the written comments, we then go on to say that we are going to hold public hearings. So we've got two types of consultation. One would be the written comments, 30 days, and then the other one is public hearings. And the public hearings, historically, we've done it in the 9 provinces. So at that time that we used to travel without, before the COVID and before the virtual meetings, would go right to Eastern Cape, go right to Free State, go to Western Cape, and present and listen to stakeholders. Once we have also done that now, we do our own analysis. Those would be more technical analysis. But together with the technical analysis, we then say, what did the customers say? What did the stakeholders say? We may have been blindfolded somewhere. Maybe there's one stakeholder that may have seen something that we take into account, and then we make necessary adjustments. And once we have done that, we then present our recommendations to the board. And the board then would make a decision based on all of that. But the bulk of it is technical analysis and the full consultation process.
Help me understand this, Brian. Nersa can only engage with the public about the tariff application once it has been released publicly. Hey, is that my understanding? Would that be correct?
Yes, you see, it will be correct to say that we cannot talk about something that has not even. Remember, we're still now going to say to our board we want to publish this application. Now, if we are going to talk about it in public, that would be unfair to the board because the board has not actually had the full view of that application.
Fair enough, Brian. I am in conversation with Brian Sitrato from Nersa. Please send us your questions, your comments. We're talking about electricity prices and tariffs in South Africa and how they are structured. So please send us your questions and comments. Brian, let's look at how electricity pricing is made up or comprises. There are certain fixed components to the pricing, regardless of how much energy Eskom generates, such as staff costs of Eskom or municipalities. Then there are variable costs, and these are the cost of producing energy, such as the kilowatt per hour. Based on previous Eskom applications or deliberations. Do you know the percentage split between the fixed versus variable costs that Eskom has perhaps told Nersa of? Would you be able to share some insights on that, if possible?
I cannot give you the direct number,
Yeah, yeah,
but we know that the energy has been the highest number, because clearly most of it is based on the generation that Eskom is the generation power stations and the running of these power stations, and then you've got the smaller portion would then be the transmission part, and then distribution is in the middle. So in terms of fixed and variable, it will vary up like that. But the fixed cost would really be recovered through a monthly basic charge. And those monthly basic charges is really for the services, the customer services, metering and stuff like that. And then the other part is the energy, as we said, which will be the cents per kilowatt hour. And then the other component would then be the capacity. That is the usage of the transmission lines, distribution lines. That would be the three components in a tariff. The largest, obviously, is the energy.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes further, Brian, because also, as I said, determining electricity prices is complex because NERSA also considers subsidies that the government grants for indigent households and subsidies for poverty relief. There are relief measures in place to subsidize households that cannot afford electricity. Would that be correct as well too, hey, Brian?
Actually, I was going to come to that.
Okay.
Remember when there was a stage where I said that would be an average tariff, but we have not gone to the individual tariffs of customers. Now, well, after that process has been done, Eskom would then do what they call a cost of supply study. And then a cost of supply study would actually say how much are industries contributing to this particular cost driver? How much are residential customers contributing to this one? And how much are maybe agricultural customers contributing to that? Now, what you find after the cost of supply study has been done, you find amazingly at a level of cents per kilowatt hour, you'll find that residential customers are bound to contribute more. And the reason being that with industrial customers, I'm going to be a bit technical. I'll try to simplify as much as possible.
Please, Brian, we're not experts like you here, hey? So please.
I'll try my best. And then there would be a generation, and that generation, most of the generators are in Mpumalanga. But then you need to transport that power on high voltage power lines. You see the big ones with that they need to transport it at high voltage. That is the second component. And then after that, they need to bring down the level of voltage, bring it down to the level of distribution, which is much lower voltage. And then there would be the final part of actually taking these things to the houses. Now, most industrial customers would probably be at high voltage, taking their power at high voltage. So that there is no step down costs additional to the industrial customers. But for the domestic, they go through from the generation to the high voltage, to the medium voltage, and to the low voltage. So there are costs, more costs than there are for the industrials. And industrial, because they consume more volumes. So when you divide by the volumes, then it becomes a lower price than it is for the customers, because there's no pooling there. Now, what happens in terms of the question about subsidies, because there is this high price for the domestics, we then use what we call a cross subsidy, where we make industrial customers to cover some of the costs that actually should have been paid by the domestic customers. So that would be a subsidy from the larger customers to the lower customers. That would be the one subsidy in terms of protecting the poor, protecting even myself and yourself. I mean, if we were to pay the right price, then it will be much higher than what you are currently paying. That is the first type of subsidy. But then there is this other one that is outside of the tariffs, and that is the government one. And this is specifically for indigent customers. And that is called the free basic electricity. And at the moment, it is something that is out of the Department of Minerals and Energy, which is now Department of Energy, Electricity and Energy.
Yeah.
That allows for the municipalities in the make to provide 50 kilowatt hours free to their domestic customers. So the domestic customers, the indigent, will start to pay for the electricity, the 51st kilowatt hour. The rest will be free.
Yes.
So those are the two types of subsidies that you have. The one that is coming from the government, paid by fiscus, and the other one where you actually, instead of making the customers to pay for the real cost, you say you industrial customers, you must subsidize the domestic customers, residential. You must subsidize them. But that one is a bit, it's a difficult one. Yeah. In other areas, we've got a lot of, you've got industrials, big industrial customers. So you may find that the subsidy there is easy because those industrial customers would share that subsidy. But in areas where you've got less industrialized, then it means that now, in order for them to subsidize, you are depending on very few industrials. So it puts a burden on those industrials. And again, you don't want to kill them. Some of these industrial customers are competing international markets. So if you over tax them, I'll call it tax them, then it means that when they go and sell their commodities in international markets, they will be competitively disadvantaged because the other in the other countries that they compete with, they may not be required to do as much subsidization as we would do in South Africa. So again, it's that kind of playing around with these numbers.
Yeah, so it's you taking into account the interests of many stakeholders and role players.
Exactly, yes.
I think for me, the scariest statistic that was shared by the electricity minister, Jose Ramokgopa, was that specifically speaking about the relief measures in place to subsidize households that cannot afford electricity. Mr. Ramokgopa said there are about 10 million people who qualified for the free basic electricity, but only 2 million people receive it. Now, the National Treasury does provide this money for this relief, and about 80% of the money received is possibly misappropriated by municipalities. So it seems like the relief that is there in place to subsidize households is there, but it's not really hitting the mark and reaching people where it should. Do you find that that's a problem, Brian?
Definitely, it is a problem. It is a problem, and there are many factors that cause that. And we have actually, because we are on the ground. Remember, this is a government policy. But because we as Nersa, we are the implementers of that. We are on the ground. Whenever we find these anomalies, we then make a list of them to the then DMRE to say, look, the intention is good, but unfortunately, it is difficult. Some of the things may be that the vendors, the people that are providing the service, where the customers need to go and buy that token. They are far from the places where these people are living, especially at rural areas. Now, if I'm living in that place and then I need to go get that token of 50 kilowatt hours, I need to take some transport. And you may find that the transport cost then will exceed the benefit I'll get out of the 50 kilowatt hours. So I opt to say, no, let me rather not go and get it because I can't go and pay 70 rands and get 50 rands worth of electricity because the cost is. So we've said maybe we need to find other ways of distributing this free basic electricity. That is the real main cause that has happened. It's really about the distance, and some people, again, not being aware of the free basic electricity. So that is partly education,
Yeah.
but also maybe we need more vending stations nearer to the households, so that they don't have to pay exorbitant price, transport cost to go and get the 50 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's interesting that Eskom has long argued that it does not generate enough revenue from electricity sales to fund its operations without financial support from the government in the form of, bailouts. In fact, in motivating for increases, Eskom has often cited operational and financial challenges it faces. It struggles to get municipalities to pay for debt, electricity debt. Eskom is facing pressure to increase its electricity generation capacity due to the delays with the renewable energy program. Then there's still the impact of state capture and corruption as well, to lots of issues there. But Brian, to me as the ordinary individual, it seems like Eskom's approach to tariff increases and perhaps the tariff methodology and structure is quite punitive to the public. And the public is having to pay for sometimes Eskom's own failure to reform. It feels that way, to be honest, Brian. And I just wonder, is this a valid concern? Is this a valid view? How do we get around these sort of comments and views? Huh?
It is a valid concern.
Mm,
And that is why at the moment,
mm,
remember, I spoke about that MYPD, that
yeah,
multi-year price determination methodology. This will be the last time that we are using it in its current form. And that is because of exactly what you are saying. Because there may be, there may be elements that may need to be corrected, so that they correct exactly what you are saying. And we only look at allowing only the efficient costs. So we are in the process of reviewing the methodology. We are starting as soon as we finish with this application that you're speaking about.
mm. If you can you talk us through what some of the changes we'll look at going forward in the structure, or what are the new considerations to be in place, if any?
I think the one that I can speak about maybe freely
Sure.
is we've realized that there is challenges with the forecasting of sales. Would focus sales to be certain volume, but then at the end you only sell less, and then they come to make that correction. They want to increase the price because
Mm,
the revenue has been set. But in a normal business,
mm,
you would not only manage the price, but you'll also make sure that you sell sufficient volumes in order to recover the revenue that you want to recover, and so that you can be able to pay for the costs. So that
mm.
is one of the areas that I can talk about, which has
Sure.
actually been a thorn even for us. I mean, every year we've got that regulatory clearing account, where we make corrections for things that have not been properly forecasted at the time that the decisions are made. So
Yeah.
that for me, I can say that would be the focus. In other areas, obviously, we'll need to look at
Yeah.
them.
You know, apologies for being blunt, Brian, but it seems like the pricing structure is a mess. You know, it seems like there's so many factors to be considered and so many variables to be considered here. Uh, you know, yes, I said it's complex, but there's a bit of dysfunction as well too.
I'm not sure whether it's a dysfunction, but
Mm,
I think you know, some of the things you develop a methodology for a
mm,
particular period in life. But then as we go, things change, and then you need to always review the methodology. And that's why we are also saying we need to review the methodology. But as it is right now, the methodology, most of it, 90%, especially for this part that I'm talking about of the forecasting, I would believe that the methodology is still valid. We can still use the methodology, but it needs to be changed for other various factors that we have already mentioned yourself.
So sorry, Brian, just to clarify something, the forecasting by Eskom of its projected revenue, are you saying that, I mean, there are problems there, or there are not no problems at all?
You know, the one thing about forecasting, is that the best guess is that it's going to be wrong.
Okay.
When you do forecasting, the one thing that you can be sure about is that it's not going to be the right outcome. Because at that time you've got, remember, Eskom does this. We do this thing for 3 years, 5 years. So to forecast something today for the next 3 years is a challenge on its own. So there will be differences. It's not a matter of forecasting being a problem, but it's a matter of how do you correct for those forecasting errors, if I can call it that, or forecasting variables. Now, the methodology right now allows for those forecasting variables to be allowed in terms of additional increases in prices. But we are saying we need to correct that part.
Yeah.
Even if we cannot correct the forecasting, that is everywhere, forecasting will always be wrong. But we cannot correct it through the increases in prices.
Yeah, you see, Brian, I have a difficulty with that, because if the wrong methodology, or if there's wrong forecasting for revenue, that has implications basically for the determination of tariffs going forward. So, you know, if the room for error on forecasting is so wide, then that has negative implications basically for determining tariffs as well too. So that's the only concern and danger that sits with me, and I'm sure with the public as well.
And it's a true concern, and that's why when Eskom comes to Nersa with those forecasts, we then also take it to other economists, other engineers. We do our own forecasting, and at the end we land at a number that we all believe is the possible outcome. And normally we try to limit it to about say 5%, but unfortunately, especially because of, you know, there's been load shedding, there's been COVID, there's been coming in of IPPs, then those forecasting errors actually are going to be there because of those unknown factors at the time that the forecasts are being done. So the issue is not the wrong forecasting itself, but as I say, you need to find a way of saying, if these outcomes do come, you don't have to then push it all to the customers. Some of it, you limit it to Eskom. For instance, those that are related to load shedding, we have said clearly to Eskom that, no, you could have avoided the load shedding. So we are not going to allow you to load shed and then make me also pay for the electricity that you have not made me to receive at the end of the day.
Yeah. Which brings me back to the earlier question I asked. You know, it feels like, you know, the public is somewhat, or in part, paying for Eskom's own failures. So I hope going forward the pricing structure will take into account of that and shield, you know, consumers from any failures that sit with Eskom, because it feels like the structure currently is quite punitive. But can we talk about the changes in the electricity market? We know that the renewable energy market is taking hold. The market is opening up, in fact, for renewable energy players. In fact, with every, you know, bidding round for renewable energy, such as solar PV and wind, those prices are dropping. I just wonder, as Nersa, how do you think pricing of renewable energy will change the way in which tariffs are determined? Are you thinking about the changes that are happening at the moment in the electricity market?
remember currently
Mm,
all the IPPs
mm,
sell their energy to Eskom.
mm,
But remember that is just a percentage of the total energy that Eskom supplies to its customers.
yeah.
So far, it has I was looking at the numbers. It's at more than 80% is still coming from Eskom's own generation.
Mm,
But obviously, with the changing shape of the industry, that percentage may grow.
mm,
And once it grows, and the good thing that you also mentioned is that at the beginning, we saw that the renewable energies, the prices were very high, mainly
mm,
because of new technologies, the learning curve and everything. But we have seen that it's been dropping, and we're hoping that it will be dropping. But in terms of how it will affect in the future, it will depend on the new structure. We know that there's intention from government to unbundle Eskom or to unbundle the industry. Already, there's been a transmission company that has been established. As to who will be buying the renewables, it's not so clear. But the intention of government has always been that they want to create a market so that you don't have to have only one Eskom selling all the electricity. So we may have bilaterals where me and you can just go to a renewable energy producer and buy from them directly. And
yeah.
in that way, bypass the Eskom if we believe that I'm getting more value from buying from the renewable energy than I'm getting the value from buying from Eskom.
Mm. Because the opening up of the electricity market and with more renewable energy coming into the market has serious implications for Eskom. The demand for electricity from Eskom might reduce, and also the cost structure of Eskom might even change for having to supply a much reduced base of customers. So will the pricing architecture of electricity have to take into account those changes as well too, hey?
It has to. It has to. Remember, when the volumes of electricity that you are selling, the demand is going down,
Mm,
then
mm,
obviously you probably need to generate less. So you are reducing the cost on the other side. It's not only the demand that is reducing, but also the cost of generation is reducing. You will need less staff to run the company, so the cost will be reducing. But maybe
mm,
those staff will then be moving to the other players like the renewables and the likes. So there will be a changing shape of the industry. And if you say you are going to introduce competition and generation, then
mm,
probably that in itself will not be subjected to this full regulation. It will be maybe the market that set the price.
mm,
And hopefully, when the market sets the price,
mm,
because of that competition will make the bidding of our electricity into the market, will try to bring as low prices as possible as generators. And then that has a potential of bringing the cost of electricity down. But in other markets, it has not happened like that. But theoretically, that's what is supposed to happen when you've got competition.
yeah. And are those the lessons from international? Are you drawing any lessons from international markets and how things are done there? Is that what you often look at?
We often do that. We
Mm,
do engage with those that have already done it, but obviously you don't take it. You don't do cut and paste. You've got to consider um, the characteristics of South Africa. For
mm,
instance, if you take a European country, they don't have this big problem that we have of unemployment, indigent customers.
mm,
They are mostly less than 5% or so unemployment. But we are with us, we're sitting more than 30% unemployment. So we cannot just take it like that and then put it to the indigent to our own country. But we do learn for those
mm,
parts that it works. Yes, we do want to do that.
yeah. We're getting a lot of questions from our audience about Nersa specific operations and as well as the architecture of electricity prices. I'm going to start with Christopher Jordan. Thank you so much for your question. Christopher says, when economic growth is so low, it makes forecasting quite easy. Surely, where is the additional demand coming from? So in a low growth in a low economic growth environment, surely forecasting should be a bit easier, or not?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if remember the one thing is that forecasting is not only based on the Eskom part, but it also takes into account what comes from the IPPs. And there are people. Remember, there's also people, and you cannot at the time that you are doing forecast, you don't know how many people are going to move their electricity needs to maybe solar panels. We've seen that there's been a low growth in solar panels. Some of them are in big factories. They've actually taken off from the grid, and they're providing for their own. In many houses, as you drive around, you'll find that there's more solar panels. So it has actually affected the forecasting. Because at the time that it was not so sure whether or not the solar panels will be taken up in the way that it has been taken up. Maybe the taking up of that was also because of the load shedding, and people decided that rather than me losing power from time to time, I'm going to move to providing my own electricity. So that has got still some level of forecasting error. Not that we need to accept all of the forecasting errors, but there are certain things that may drive the forecasting not to be on point.
Your namesake, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for your question. Brian asks what measures are in place to limit manageable costs, such as the wage bill with increases, mismanagement, and corruption. So again, asks about fixed variable costs and what measures are in place to limit those manageable costs.
Yeah, when you're talking, for instance, let's take the first one that he mentions.
Yeah.
When you go and you say that we want to manage salary costs, the wage bill. Obviously, if you look at it, Eskom's staff complement has been going down. But also, when Eskom would come to us, and they come, for instance, they say their salary per individual is going to be increasing by 8%. But that is not what we think it should be. We believe that it is 5% or maybe inflation, and then we limit to that inflation. Then Eskom must actually fasten their belt and make sure that they operate within that which has been allowed by Nersa.
Dr. Vishnu Naidu asks rather, is the transmission infrastructure owned by Eskom or the state? That's the first question. If you can clarify it, Brian, if you know.
From my understanding, and I'll just give you a general answer. The new company, the NTCSA,
yes,
is a subsidiary of the Eskom Holdings. So that means for now, the infrastructure that they have is a subsidy of Eskom. But I don't know what the future intention would be. For now, remember, when you do the restructuring, you don't go full blown. You take those parts that you can actually control. So for that one, I don't know what the future will look like. But the way it is right now, the NTCSA is a subsidiary of Eskom Holdings.
Yeah. And the second part of Vishnu's question is, will there be a cost and technical challenges in uploading renewables to this transmission infrastructure? Voltages. My understanding there is, there are limitations when it comes to the electricity infrastructure, especially we've seen this in the previous bidding round where there are grid capacity limitations. A lot of our electricity infrastructure, there's lack of grid capacity in some provinces across the country. I'm not sure if you want to expand on that, Brian.
Yeah, you see, that is really out of my skills and capacity.
Okay.
But yeah, but I mean, yeah, I'd rather not try and commit to something that I may not be able to answer properly.
And Michael Prince asks, I wonder how much of Eskom's generation costs are impacted by peak demand. If peak and off-peak tariffs could be implemented, would that help? This seems like a very specific Eskom question. Do you want to have a bite at it, maybe, Brian?
Yeah, but I think they are already. They are, but obviously there is peak of peak and standard tariff. These are the time periods. You've got peaks in the morning, and then during the day you've got standards, and then you've got another peak in the evening. So there are tariffs like that. But remember again, these things depend on the meter that you have in your house. For domestic customers, we don't have this kind of smart meters that would actually allow for you to control your consumption at those periods. But for the industrial customers, they are on what the basic Eskom has got a tariff called Mega Flex. And that flex stands for flexibility in a way. So you have a meter, and then in the morning peak, you'll be paying a high price.
Yeah.
And then in the standard, you'll be paying maybe medium, and then off peak will be the lowest price that you are paying. So you will it is an incentive for you to control your consumption for those periods. It is already there for sure.
Someone wants to know about the I've lost the question, but it was Dieter. Dieter wants to know who appoints the Nersa board.
Straightforward, it is the minister.
Mm-hmm.
The minister of right now it's going to be the minister of electricity and energy. It used to be the minister of minerals and energy resources.
Okay. I'm not sure if this is a comment or a question, but Christopher Jordan says if Eskom was a private company, it would have been liquidated by now. Why is Eskom not placed under business rescue so that it can be right-sized and the costs brought under control? Christopher, we also wonder, but this is not, in Brian's purview, right?
Now, clearly, that is not just in my purview, but in Nersa's purview, because that's a policy decision. And that is why probably the restructuring of Eskom is beginning now. But that is not for Nersa to respond to, I think.
And Catherine Ambrose asks, what about the low-level user on prepaid? They pay a higher rate and have snack monthly charge and pay for the meter. In your experience, is this the case, Brian?
You see, the prepaid tariff, the structure of that, remember I said there's three components to the tariff. It will be the demand and the monthly service fees. Now, what they've done in the prepaid tariff, they've combined it so you don't get to be charged the basic charge, the monthly basic charge, fixed charge. You don't have to pay the KVA charge. So it's combined. So when you look at that energy charge and you compare it to the energy charge of a tariff that has got two parts to it, it looks lower than that. But when you can do it based on the average consumption, you'll find that it probably is lower than that one. So it's not only the one component. And I think this question has come many times, because you are saying we don't want you to be paying a separate, because if you are paying for the monthly basic charge, even if you don't consume anything for that month, you'll be expected to pay that basic charge. So the prepaid, you'll only be paying for that which you are consuming.
And Penny Phillip, hi Penny, just joined the conversation, so apologize if this question has already been answered. How did we have load shedding one day and not the next? Penny, if we had someone from Eskom, they would have helped us understand this. But from what I understand is that, I write about Eskom quite a lot through my work at Daily Maverick. Apparently, Eskom tells us that there is now an improved effort to monitor the performance of power stations, and where breakdowns occur at power stations, they are immediately addressed. So apparently there is a much better monitoring of the performance of power stations, and where problems come up, they are quickly addressed. I'm told there is a huge culture shift and a huge performance shift within Eskom, with the new management and the board coming in place right now. And that is why we haven't seen or experienced any load shedding for about 4 months. So that's what Eskom has told us. But if we had somebody here from Eskom, they would have added more color to this. Christopher asks, of the generation capacity, how much power is being supplied to the indigent? Do you know in terms of gigawatts?
No, not the top.
Not at the top of your head.
But,
I'm sure we can easily find that number
yeah.
if we Google. And Dita asks, it was clear after the first IPP projects that Eskom had insufficient transmission structure to speed up the renewables. How many transmission lines have been built in the last 10 years? Sure. I don't even know this. You have any answer for that?
No, I definitely. I think that the very same thing that you provided about Eskom having not been present, I think they would be the best people to really respond to that. But yeah.
Yeah. And Nico Yonka asks, how could municipalities ever satisfy customers if during IDP process, Jan and May, they must guess what Eskom. I'm trying to understand this question, Nico. But what is an IDP process, first of all?
Um, it's a planning. It's a planning. I can't remember what it
the acronym for it, hey?
Yeah, it's for planning where they go around, the municipality go around in communities and present a draft budget where the communities would then comment on that draft budget, and the draft budget would then be tabled in council, when
Yeah.
then the municipality would then finalize their budget. I do understand the question that
Okay.
I can't
Right.
remember the.
Let me try a stab at it again, Brian. How could municipalities ever satisfy customers if during IDP process in January to May, they must
Yes.
guess what the Eskom rise would be and still balance their budgets?
No, I got that. I got
Okay.
that. What I'm saying is that that's a valid answer, and it depends on when the Eskom price determination is done. Because
Okay.
remember, what happens is that Eskom is the main generator and transmitter and sells also to the municipalities. The municipalities would then have to do their own tariffs for their own end-use customers. So if the Eskom price is not known at that time, when the municipality is consulting its customers, it becomes a difficulty for the municipalities. But what Nersa used to do, and I'm saying used to do because that process has been declared to be unlawful, we used to do a guideline to the municipality to say, based on the Eskom estimate or the Eskom price, this would be the guideline that would give to you for you to then use in terms of determining or drafting your own tariffs. But the new method, which is now going to be based on cost of supply, there is Eskom retail tariff process, which we aim to finalize every time in December. This is a new process after the court judgment of unlawfulness. Once that retail tariff has been done, that that problem of municipalities having to guess will definitely be minimized. But we used to do it through the guideline process.
So the period of December seems to be quite a busy one, an important one for Nersa, because I think Nersa also has to make a determination before the end of December, if memory serves. Hey, if my memory is correct. So once you have received Eskom's application, and once the board deliberates on the application itself, Nersa has to make a decision before the end of December, if memory serves. Or are there timeline restrictions, basically?
No, there's no timeline restrictions. Actually, the sooner we make it, the better.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in most instances, depending on the time we receive the application on, because remember, we have to go through that long process of consultation for 30 days, in public hearings and all of that. So it looks like normally it would be around December, but normally we try not to make it at that time. We try to make it remember also before Eskom comes to us, there is a requirement that they consult for 40 days with the National Treasury and SALGA. So there is added timelines to that process. Yes, December this year looks to be going to be a bit busy, but definitely we try to say, let's bring it closer. Let's make it maybe earlier than that.
Someone asked a question about if they disagree with Nersa's tariff approval or whatever percentage that Nersa settles on. Are there any mechanisms to challenge that decision? But I guess that's where the public consultation processes come into play, and that's how they become important to sort of, test the public's, acceptance or or tolerance for those tariffs, eh?
No, but the public participation process, remember, it's more about stakeholders giving input. But I think the question that is being asked now is the one of saying, you've already now done the determination. Do I, as a customer, have any where to go where I can maybe ask for the change of this tariff? The law allows for any stakeholder that is not happy with the decision that has been made by Nersa to take it on review. But that review will have to be taken via the courts. And once the court find out, either the court can say, Nersa, go and redo your work, or declare that tariff not to be lawful. And then we'll have to redo it. But everyone has got, you yourself, you can actually take it up. But obviously it depends. Normally this takes a lot of money, a lot of lawyers. So it would probably be the larger guys that does that.
Yeah. Funny enough, you mentioned court. Eskom seems to take you to court quite a lot lately, or in previous years, that is. But we won't, delve into this. Brian, we left it with about 3 minutes to this conversation. Geez, time really flies, hey? But going forward, in your views, what kind of reforms are needed in terms of the electricity pricing methodology, architecture? What are the big changes that are coming our way as South Africa, as the energy market, as well as Nersa, the regulator?
I think the biggest one, I think we start with the methodology that I mentioned. I mean, the industry is changing. We need to have a tariff for specifically the transmission. We need to have that tariff. We need to have a mechanism of how we regulate the remaining distribution and generation if they are going to remain in Eskom. There needs to be a decision on how much competition we introduce, especially at generation, and probably also at retail. But I doubt if there'll be too much competition at generation. So if those things can be done and done very quickly, then I believe that there will be some kind of changes going forward.
Well, Brian, we're just going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much. This was a really teachable moment, teachable conversations. I, as a journalist who writes about, energy quite a lot, there's some things that I didn't know, didn't know or understand, but I feel like now I have a better understanding, and I feel like I'm empowered next time when I read, the percentage of tariffs that Nersa has approved. But Brian, thank you so much. It was lovely. And to you, the audience, thank you so much for joining us. I think it was a really good discussion, even though Eskom was not here. But thank you so much, everybody. Take care, Brian.
Thank you so much, Ray.